Happy Friday, Weekend Warriors. Weekendology is back again with a brand new episode to ease your weekly woes. We're the only podcast with the hottest takes, the best talking points, and the stories to spark your weekend conversations. This is the show where we talk about music, movies, sports, and more related to media and give our takes on how we can change and improve them. So I'm your host, Will Deisley, alongside the only Aaron Berg. Aaron, what's up today, buddy?
You know it. I'm the only one.
You are the only Aaron Berg, at least the only one that I know. So
B-U-R-G.
B-U-R-G.
Well, I got to spell it.
Exactly. You used to spell out your Twitter handle, and you kind of stopped that.
Yeah, well, we haven't been giving ourselves shout-outs, so
well, that's true.
You want to give me a follow. I'm Aaron Levi Berg.
There you go.
At Twitter.
Yeah.
Twitter.
On Twitter. So, yeah, give us a follow then.
And follow William Deisley, too.
Yeah, follow William Deisley.
Good follows.
I'll put it in the description below. But if you're new to the show, welcome. And if you're returning to the show, please welcome back. We're happy to have you. Give us a follow on Weekendology Pod on Twitter. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all the bunch. So we've reached episode 21, Aaron. I think this is a milestone for us. 21 episodes in, where we have touched upon so many different types of topics, and we were scratching our heads as to what we're going to talk about a few weeks ago, and then we riled off like 3 or 4 or 5 different types of episode ideas, and here we are. We've got a next couple weeks planned. So
yeah, you get to the 20s and you're like, okay, well, what do I have left? And then all of a sudden 5 more ideas come to you, and you're
exactly.
like, okay, we're good now. We can make it to 26, and then we'll start all over again.
We've got plenty of stuff, more stuff in store for you guys as well. So I'm happy to have a good guest on for us today. An exciting episode planned for you. Today's guest is a longtime media and podcast host and publisher. You hear him all the time in the show intros. He's the owner of the Big Red World Podcasting Network.
He's the Podfather.
He is the Podfather. He's featured on podcasts such as The House That Rick Built and more. Please welcome the one and only Collin Kessler. Collin, how's it going today?
Well, I don't know. That might have been a little too glowing of an intro for me there. I don't know if I'm the Podfather, but yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, guys.
Well, good. Well, glad to have you on the show. I'd say you're the Podfather. I'd say it's you own.
Oh, the Podfather of my network, maybe.
Yeah. Well, that's the only thing that matters too. And
right, it is the only thing that matters. You're right. It's the only thing in the world. Forget Barstool, forget the Ringer, forget anything else you've heard. Big Red World, it's all that matters.
Exactly. And I'm glad you actually brought Barstool up, because we're going to be talking about them in today's episode. Today's episode is all about how startup media companies are taking over and changing the way of podcasting, entertainment, how we consume news, how we publish it, so on and so forth. So we're excited to have Collin on. He's been around the game for a little while now, and we're going to talk about him with his rise of the Big Red World Network, and kind of his experience with how podcast networks and media companies have kind of taken over. So we're ready to dive into it. I think the beginning of this is obviously, we have companies like Barstool and TFM. They've kind of given way to kind of unique branding to these new types of media networks. I mean, their social media accounts they're pretty brash. They have their own type of I guess identity, so to speak. So we wanted to talk with Collin about how that came to fruition, and what Big Red World is doing to compete with them as well. So Collin, you started your own startup media company, Big Red World. How did you get into that, and what does that all encompass for you?
Boy, well, I started a class last fall, or it was fall of 2018 now, I guess. Sophomore year in college, was doing this class. Is basically you build a website on Wix or Squarespace, wherever you might do it. You build the website and then you fill it with content. You fill it with podcast content, blog content, all this. So I was doing the class, had a couple of extra ideas on the side, went up to my professor, so I think you should do this, on your own. So he showed me how to set up a Wix page. Originally, it was Dude, Where's My? It was a really, really crummy blog about, basically it was a knockoff of Ashton Kutcher's Dude, Where's My Car? Stuff I would just pick topics that had disappeared. So like one of them, I worked in a movie video rental store for 2 years. And so one of them was, Dude, Where's My
What year?
Like
what year is this? You just talked about blogs Dude, Where's My Car and a video rental store in the same sentence.
I think it's 1997.
Did you go to college in the late 90s?
Yeah. Well, you know what? If you saw my hairline, you would think that I did go to college, maybe even in the early 80s. No, the thing is, I grew up, whether or not obviously it was a little dated, but I grew up on That 70s Show because that was what was playing late on TV, right? So I grew up on like Michael Kelso and that Ashton Kutcher. And I was just like, when I started doing this stuff, I was so excited by getting into the media side of things that I was just looking for anything in the world to dig my teeth into. And for some reason, I thought a stoner comedy movie would be a great way to start a blog series and apparently a whole website. And so that changed, pretty quickly in the big red world because I just got tired of saying, dude, where's mine to everyone.
Yeah, I think, it really started to me in like 2010, 2011, more so when Will and I were in college because of TFM. That's my first memories of that, of a company that came out and they started kind of, same way. They were just doing posts, like the hashtag TFM type deal on Twitter where it would just be one sentence and it would just be humorous and funny. And then they started getting into blogs and podcasting and, more kind of the breadth of media. But it really started out simple and it just stuck to a brand and stuck to that. Hey, this is comedy. This isn't serious. This is just meant to be funny and take your mind off things. And it really kind of created that culture that I think you're seeing. And I know Barstool was before them, but I really think they influenced Barstool and now they're influencing a ton of these other companies and like yours too now, where you can kind of take a piece of what they did already. So, but take us through that, just your vision of starting it. I mean, did you see Bigger World turning into what it is today, or was it kind of trial by error, like just see where this goes, starting from a class and then kind of piecing it together as you go along?
Yeah, no, to be honest, I messed up. I messed up big time. What I should have done from the jump was do a show that was all of my interests and all of my things that I want to talk about, because my biggest concern when I first started doing podcasts was that my shows had to be really focused to a specific audience, focused to a certain group of people so that I could really just target them and grab those listeners. And so I did a baseball show. I did a hockey show. I did the House of Rick built for Billikens basketball. At one point I was going and playing like a doubleheader in baseball because I was playing college baseball at the time. And then I would get done with that at like 8:00 at night, get back to my dorm room at like 9 and knock out like 2 shows or whatever it was. I mean, it was ridiculous. And so that's where the network thing started though, because I wanted to talk about all these different things and I didn't want to force people essentially to listen to stuff they didn't care about. So I really segmented what I was putting out. And then I got connected with Alec Brodsky, and he's become essentially my business partner on this whole thing. And he does a show called Six Drunk, One Sober. Here's a humble plug or a subtle plug for him. Six Drunk, One Sober. He is the sober monitor for 6 people who have been drinking, and I've seen it at all various stages of intoxication. There are some that are handling it and are coherent and giving reasonable answers, and there are some people that just disappear from the podcast during the middle of the podcast. But that's a really great show because he asks a lot of questions that people don't want to hear or that people don't normally want to talk about when they're sober. So getting a little alcohol in them makes those questions, well, really the answers to those questions a little bit better. But there's my quick plug for that. But what you were talking about, and I thought it was really interesting, I've thought this through for a long time now, the progression of the media that we're looking at. You've got the Barstool platform. I love the Ringer, the Bill Simmons network. You also talked about TFM's whole frat move, and they connected with, I believe, the Ross Bowen podcast, if I'm not mistaken, and kind of did their own thing over there. What it really looks like, and what it really looks like looking back on it to me, was it's just a normal progression of technology catching up with every media avenue we had. Look at Netflix. Netflix was doing, we'll send you the DVDs and we'll send you the discs, because that was where the market was. Blockbuster and video rental stores were there, and Netflix was saying, well, we'll just bring it to your doorstep. Well, now Netflix brings it to your living room TV or your bedroom TV. And in the same way, when you had this newspaper writing and these newspaper articles moving onto the internet, whether it was for, a New York Times website or a more personal stuff, kind of Hunter S. Thompson and even really Bill Simmons-esque, where it's more personalized, it's more opinionated, and probably a little bit more comfortable with the language. And then you get into podcasting, and now we've converted radio over to this internet form where you can take it anywhere, you can listen to it anywhere. And more so than that, you can put you're putting these earphones in and you're listening to someone talk directly to you. It's this really personal type of content that didn't even exist with radio. So it's really been an interesting transition there too. I know I kind of divulged off a number of topics.
No, I think it was interesting that you brought up what Netflix was doing beforehand, and I think Six Drunk, One Sober is a very unique type of podcast to do because it's something a little bit different, and it kind of fits into that line of it's different type of entertainment. It's engaging with people. It's also very unique. And what Barstool was doing, what TFM were doing at the time when they got really popular, it was something that was not too cultural mainstay or too very normative at that time. And I think they flourished with that type of culture and that mentality. Is they were pretty brash. We're in a very politically correct world now. They didn't really appease to anybody who didn't like sports or didn't like that style of humor or that style of branding. Collin, how important is it for you to stick to your own guns when you're branding your own startup media company, and how have you gone through that with Big Red World so far?
Well, I mean, you talk about Barstool, and it's hard not to talk about Barstool. I mean, Barstool right now is the gold standard for podcast networks and publication, and just being able to turn every person that works into your company not into just a successful writer or anything, but turn them into characters. I mean, look at what Barstool is. I mean, it's basically a company full of television reality stars. But for me, in terms of the sticking to my gun side of things, when you look at Barstool, what's so interesting about what they did was they essentially took, because Barstool, look at their Instagram, look at their Twitter account. Half the time the stuff that's coming out of those accounts are reposted videos that they're putting funny captions on, that they're sharing to their larger platforms so that more people can see and stuff like that. That's not really original content, but what Barstool showed you can do is take a sense of humor that you have and apply it to content that's already out there and just make funny jokes about stuff that exists. It doesn't all have to be, uniquely original or uniquely creative. Like, look at their blog writing now. Some of their blogs that come out, it's 15 tweets and maybe 3 or 4 paragraphs of like, here's what I think kind of about this tweet here or this tweet there. So when you start looking at how do you replicate that, or how do you find that success in your own way, and how do you create your own image, you have to be willing, I think, to be very opinionated and personal, because if you're not going to come out with some, big hot take, which I don't think I've done anything of that sort really, you have to have some kind of personality. You have to have some kind of entertainment value. And I don't know that I've done that a whole lot just yet. I think a lot of the stuff that I'm still trying to figure out even is, how do you run a show? How do you format a show? What do you talk about? How do you connect with people? How are you more personal on it? But if you're not willing to, and I run into this again, if you're not willing to take a hardline stance, if you're going to be in the middle and play devil's advocate on everything, I think people get tired of listening to that because it's wishy-washy. So in content aspect, if you don't stick to your guns, or you don't, make a statement and stand by it, people just get tired of listening to it. They want to hear what you think, and then they want to hear you defend it, even if that means you fighting. And if you fight, look at Barstool. People love that. Even if they think it's fake, they'll still eat it up.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too, because you don't want to change your content and change your theme too much to conform to what other people are liking, because then you get away from what really you got you into the show to begin with. But you also want to ensure that you're keeping with that same mentality of, okay, I like this idea, I'm going to run with it. But I think that's why podcasts are so popular now, because it's so raw, it's so unfiltered. Shows organically evolve over time. I mean, our show has evolved quite a bit over the time. We still stick to our theme of changing things we like to see, but we're getting into these mini episodes now. We did one with Kobe Bryant, kind of what's trending, in the news and what in social media and so on and so forth. So there's different avenues you can divulge into.
Well, and I think too,
there's so many varied platforms. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut.
Oh, you're good. You're the guest, man. Take away.
Right. Yeah. Well, I just want to step in there for a second too, because what you talked about, and this has been the weird thing for me, and this is, I think, why I literally before last fall did not touch podcasts, did not listen to a single podcast. Like, I didn't want anything to do with them. I thought they were stupid. I thought they were ridiculous. I thought they just didn't make any sense to me. I didn't get it because all the podcasts that I heard basically sounded to me like they were audiobooks.
Yeah, like
or
Serial.
They were,
like one of those, like the true crime.
They're scripted stuff.
Yeah.
And that stuff's great. And I get that there's a huge audience for that, but that's not really what I find entertaining. The style of podcast that I love and that I realized that you can do, and for some reason just didn't know that it existed. I live on social media even before this, still didn't know, is the talk radio style of podcast.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Yeah.
We actually brought that up. We had our studio owner, Michael Zavala, on a couple episodes ago, and we just spoke on that, how that's why podcasts are taking over, because it's talk radio without commercials, or maybe one or two commercials. They don't keep stopping, and it's a lot of it's unfiltered. So it's pretty much what you got when Sirius came out.
Unfiltered. That's huge. It's Howard Stern, exactly. It's unfiltered content. It's honest takes, and it's just really no commercial breaks. And so now we're just streamlining this right into our brains, and it's probably going to be a problem at some point. But
so
I think everything will be, but
and that's why I wanted to ask you. Well, first, what I was going to say before is I think why Barstool's succeeded, because they have that theme of, I mean, they started out just doing sports, and then they changed to do kind of everything. So that way they have a theme of it's 90%, maybe 85% around sports. Then they have news. They have serious stuff too. And most of it has a comedic twist, but they are showing news. I mean, I literally will learn news, updates from Barstool, as goofy as that sounds.
That's just an evolution of how their brand and like how their show is gone.
It's so smart too. Dave Portnoy, I mean, you can love him or hate him, but that is genius, that he could have run it into the ground by just being completely stupid, and he would have his moment in the sun, but people would get sick of it. But he changed it where it's still comedic, it's still funny, it's still unapologetic, but you're also getting the other side of they're serving a purpose, they're serving a need, and they're showing things like ESPN. Like, we don't need them anymore. I mean, and it's great because it's like, I got tired of ESPN because it's all agenda pushing. It's all, let's not offend anyone. Let's all, talk about the same narrative, the same players, push the same story. And Barstool's like, no, we're going to go the opposite route and do what we want to do. We don't care. If you don't like us, don't tune in. But
I think that's why everybody kind of liked them too, because they, like I said, they stuck to their guns. They were doing something that was a little unpopular at the time or a little new. And then once it started to gain traction, they started to appeal to more of a broader audience outside of the sports.
Yeah, they're keeping their theme, but they're evolving,
but
still keeping that theme, keeping that kind of that core, but also evolving enough to be diverse.
And then everybody kind
interesting.
of copied off of them and really captured on kind of the whole collegiate life, but also like the post-grad life. Then you had TFM had a divulgent of like post-grad problems as well.
Yeah, and that's so interesting to me, and Collin, we can get your take on it too, but I think they really played off of each other, because if you look at what Barstool was doing in 2010, 2011, 2012, it wasn't what they're doing today.
No.
TFM did that. Grand X did that. And I give them a lot of credit. I was a big fan of Grand X when they were around. They started that, I think. You could argue that Barstool started some of it, but I really think they did one thing, the other did another thing, and they kind of would play off and compete. And then Barstool ended up winning just because they just got so big.
Yeah.
But Collin, I mean, what do you envision Big Road World growing into? And I guess kind of step by step. I mean, are you going to try to take that Barstool theme where it's more comedic, but there's some news on it, or what's your vision for what Big Road World is and what it stands for?
Well, it's a tough question because it's evolved so much. I mean, literally when I started doing this again, it was a blog website, and I had no intention of ever doing a podcast. Like, I didn't, again,
and it's been a year, right?
Right. It's been it's just over a year. Yeah.
Wow.
I can't stress enough when I say I hated podcasts. I didn't want to do a podcast. I wanted nothing to do with it. And so I only say that to say that the sky in a lot of ways is the limit with this, but what you talk about with Barstool, for example, Barstool was doing something pretty different in terms of the way that they were delivering the content and their tone of voice, their language that they were using, stuff like that. But when you talk about the impact of Barstool for me is sports gambling, and the fact that they have essentially taken something that was once I don't want to say that it was looked at as taboo, but I mean, it was just legalized here in Illinois. So, they made it mainstream content where even parents that would probably have looked at their kid and realized, their kid's calling the bookie to put down 500 or 500,000 on a game. They're like, oh, that's a problem. Now they look at, oh, it's Barstool, or, their gambling's cool because I saw Marty Mush make a joke about it. Like, that's been the impact of Barstool, and I don't think that we're ever going to capture that or go that direction because they're so focused on sports. But what I've kind of started to notice with this is that the need right now, when you look at the barrier to entry into a media market, before, when it was traditional radio, when it was traditional television, and when it was, music is getting put out on DVDs and stuff like that, when all of that was the way it was, the barrier to entry was really, can you afford to rent studio space? Can you afford to, get into a radio station and broadcast? Can you get airtime? All these things, the cost was the barrier to entry. Nowadays, the barrier to entry for podcasting really is, can you get your content out there in front of people? It is, how good are you at social media? Because it really costs nothing to start a podcast, literally nothing. If you have a computer nowadays that has a camera, that has a microphone, that means it can record, and it can record you. It's not going to sound great, I promise you that, but you can be recorded on it. I mean, when I did my first podcast, I had 3 other people on. We did it through Skype, and it was all recorded out of the desktop audio that was coming out of my computer, and then it was being recorded back through by the desktop microphone. I mean, it's just terrible. But the barrier to entry is, can you get your content on platforms? Can you get it out there to the right people? Can you get it in front of enough faces? So we were looking at that, and how do you make that, work for a platform like us? And I think the best way we will appeal to people is if we go the app form. And we've talked about an app. We've kicked around the idea of an app, but it's going to be, it would have to be an app that's more about, it's not just about podcasting or about blog writing. It's about any form of content. Right now I've got 1.5 million projects on my plate. Some of them are video and movie related. I've done a 4-episode little documentary series, like a little behind the scenes deal. And you can go look at that on YouTube, Big Red World. But, we did some television stuff with that, and we have a lot more that's kind of in the wings. We've got some scripts that are being written from different people. So we're looking at getting into television and how we produce. And when I say television, it would be television on YouTube. It would be creating, 25, 30-minute episodes or something that you can watch on YouTube. So stuff like that. We're looking at how do we promote and produce podcasts. I have connections in the music industry in a number of different areas, very low level, mind you. It's not like I'm talking about, I know Drake, but we know some people, and we've talked to some people, and I've worked with some artists. I'm right now in the process of producing an album with someone, more just for the fun of it for me, and not as, this is where I think my life's going to go, but it's a fun thing, and I learned a little bit more about the sound engineering side of it, and more about the industry as a whole, and what it takes to, what do you need to put into an album and get that promoted? What do you need to do for a podcast, stuff like this? When you look at it, if we could create a fully functioning ecosystem, essentially, where we're hiring freelance videographers, freelance photographers, freelance producers and engineers, and all these people, and you bring them in and you say, we have work for you here. And we start paying them to come work with our people. They get work, and we create this kind of environment where everyone's got an opportunity. And this is where I start to kind of fall apart, right? Because this is such a big idea and such a big concept that we're really going to have to slow work our way into this. So obviously right now it's the podcasting side of things, but ultimately I envision being involved in every facet of media production that is out there, really.
I think that's important to do as well. I mean, you mentioned, trying to diversify yourself, and obviously you're trying to do that too. And there's a big market, saturated market for people trying to break into media. They want to own their own podcast or their own popular social media channel or YouTube channel or whatever it is. And part of what kind of the theme of this episode is, different startups around the world, how they're changing and the way the media and entertainment space is done. And so, Collin, you mentioned, where you kind of fall apart of trying to get, freelancers together or people to do this, and that. And I think there's so many other companies out there once it gets big enough that offer services for like that. I was researching into this. There's a company called Pico where they're a media company dedicated to helping other media companies gain subscribers for their websites. getting them to sign up for emails, and then ultimately getting them to pay for their services or pay for membership to that website.
Stuff like that though is why we're seeing they're calling. I've heard it called this. I'm not going to say they are calling this, but I've heard it called this by a couple of different people. They say that podcasting is the wild, wild west right now of the world. When you think about it, the reason that something like a podcast is the wild, wild west of the world right now is because we've had this transition from all these huge radio companies and radio stations that own, 15, 20, 30 different stations. And now what you're seeing is it's becoming networks. We're becoming podcast networks. So now one network owns 15, 20, 30, 40 shows, whatever it might be. And so this fight or scramble rather to kind of assemble these big operations where everyone's kind of covered, where everyone's always got work, where everyone's got a place to go. This is probably what happened, and I say it's probably because I didn't obviously live through it, but this is probably what happened at the advent of radio when everyone saw that there was so much, there's only so much radio space, so it's going to be taken up by the select few, and then they're going to give it out to the right people. Well, now we have a Twitter account, and we're going to give out the access to that Twitter account to be able to promote your content on that account to select people, and we're going to help grow podcasts and stuff like that. So it's just such a crazy cutthroat market right now, and everyone has an opportunity to get in right now because nothing is really solidified. I mean, yeah, Barstool's great and they're really popular. Yeah, The Ringer's great. They're really popular. Bill Burr's got his comedy thing. Tom Segura and Bert Kreischer, they're doing their thing. Joe Rogan, I mean, God forbid, Joe Rogan's the biggest thing in the world right now. Whether you love him or you hate him, you know who he is. So it's just this really crazy, exciting market right now for anyone to be involved in.
Yeah, I think so. And podcasts they're so popular. There's such a huge percentage of media consumption nowadays. And, obviously you're differentiating yourself by different types of content as well. But I wanted to get into, Con, what you see as the future of podcasts. Are they going to stay as is, or is it going to be even more crazy in the wild, wild west of podcasts going forward?
It's a great question. I want to say that I think that the future of it's going to be somewhere in the area of video podcasting, and we've talked about this before, but essentially what Joe Rogan does, right? Where you record the whole podcast on video, and people are doing that, and people are moving to that. Barstool's got it with Barstool Gold. Sorry there. But, I think that the great thing is people consume this content on so many different platforms. I mean, for example, right now, you've got a high school show. And they are really starting. They're probably the strongest show that I have in terms of being out on every platform, being available on every platform. I record all their shows on video. So all their shows, their full episodes are up on video. So they do a really great job of being across all platforms. And what we saw was that actually their numbers just continue to grow. And it's a common sense thought here, but their numbers across the board continue to grow when we were getting into different platforms. We were sitting at the 100, 150, 200. They got up as high as 500 on some episodes, but not that often. But they were sitting right around 100, 200 per episode listeners when it was just, the audio-only podcast. And when we moved to video and started putting it up on YouTube, it hurt some of our numbers on the straight podcast, on the just audio-only. But across the board, we were seeing more growth from, the YouTube is continuing to grow, but the podcast, it might have taken a hit, but it's still keeping steady. And you also have, people are watching it on Instagram TV, and I can get, hour-long episodes on Instagram TV. So I don't know. I think the future of podcasting is just being able to diversify yourself over a number of different platforms, and then not just keep it to one show, right? It's not just that you're doing your podcast, but you're coming up with spin-off things to do on your show. Again, the high school show, they do a song review, and that does really well in between their shows, and it keeps people interested. So, the sky's the limit, but I think diversifying and being able to put out more content is just really what it all comes down to.
So, from your standpoint, I mean, it sounds like what it takes for a single podcast to be successful, and we are going to get into that, why does a podcast fail? Why does it succeed? That sort of thing. But from your standpoint, running a media company, bigger picture, why does the company succeed? Why is Big Red World continue to grow and continue to bring other podcasts on. What did you do right? And also, what did you do wrong? And what are you going to be looking to change moving forward?
Oh, what am I going to be looking to change? Everything, frankly, no.
Well, let's start with
getting turned upside down.
What have you done right so far that people can look at and say, okay, this is how, I guess something you're proud of how you've grown it.
Well, I think it's the common sense aspect of it, right? When you really think about how do you promote a podcast, and when we really started getting down to just the nitty gritty of when we were first starting off, how do we get this out there to more people? I mean, sure, we can tweet it out to our follower base, but here's the problem. And for anyone that started a podcast or anyone that's followed me and has kind of understood this, people get kind of tired of hearing you tweet about the same thing over and over again. So, that follower base that you start off when you get into this market, it disappears pretty quickly, and you've got to get to new followers, you've got to get new people, and you've got to find people that are interested in hearing the content that you're tweeting about or the topics that you're tweeting about. And so the way that the network kind of was envisioned initially was just kind of a you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back situation where it's, I'll help promote your show, I'll get you and your content on my platform for whatever followers I got, and I'll try to, grab some of your followers, and vice versa. You promote my content, you can grab some of my followers. This beneficial relationship between one and one with me and Alec when we first started doing it, and my network that was, the 4 shows that I was running, the 5 shows, whatever it was, and Alec's one show, and trying to cross-promote there. And then it became, okay, well, let's do this under one umbrella, and let's create a page where we can promote everything on this one page. Now, I've done a really terrible job with the one page, and I actually probably just end up doing more promotion off my personal Twitter page, but whatever. But the network itself, the way it's been successful, it was the mistake and the success of it was one day in, I believe, June, Alec posted in 2 podcasting Facebook groups and said, hey, we have this network that we're starting up. We're just trying to cross-promote and help grow other shows. Would anyone be interested in trying this out with us? In 3 days, we've got over 450 responses or something like that.
Wow.
I think that we maybe responded to 35 of them. A lot of the stuff that people wanted to see was, well, are you going to start paying for all my stuff? Or, what kind of money's involved here? What is your follower base? How diversified are you over a number of platforms? And, so we lost a lot of people right off the gate because they thought we were a more established operation, and we were literally just getting started and trying to get our foot in the door. So it worked out long term because we did end up keeping a couple shows. I think at one point we swelled up ridiculously to about 35 shows, and then went right back down to somewhere in the 10 to 15 range.
Yeah, because, you can't manage 35 shows. I mean,
but it's just that there's unrealistic expectations too coming into it, because I think I just think people, when they get into podcasting, they want to do it. They want to talk about what they think is interesting, and then they just think it's going to get picked up, right? And it's going to do well. And so when we were offering them,
they think they're interesting, so everyone would want to hear me.
Well,
right?
Everybody wants to talk about themselves, and they always want to, everybody gets a kick out of like, oh, wow, that's how I sound. That's really cool. I've got some great ideas, and people might not enjoy that. But I think, Collin, what you said was about cross-promotion from different podcasts to try and pick up some followers here and then other followers there. I think that's a really, really good strategy to do, especially if you're just still trying to break in the podcast and gain a following. And I think that could be somewhat of the future of the industry itself is, bigger networks gobbling up some of these smaller podcasts, everybody building that ecosystem, like you said, benefiting from each other, and then, pushing content out here and there to keep the process going. So I wanted to shift gears a little bit away from the podcasting. You said that you guys do a lot with different types of media, with videos and blogs and all that kind of stuff. And as a media publisher, only one form of content is going to hamper your momentum. So, talk to us about some of the video content you guys do. What was your influence and inspiration into coming up with some of those types of projects on Big Red World?
Well, I'm a psychopath, first and foremost. I want to get that out there right off the gate.
All right, we've established that, so.
Yeah, right. There's a baseline. Because for some reason, whenever I start doing something new, it gets old after about 5 or 6 days. So, when I started doing the blogs, those got old after 5 or 6 days. So then what was my next progression? Let me do a podcast. All right, I've done 1. Now let me do 10. And So the video was just a natural progression in this, psychopathic mindset that I have where it's like the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. But there wasn't really, any inspiration. The closest thing I can come to inspiration is, we'll go back to Barstool for a second. YP, young page views, dude out of St. Louis. If anyone knows anything about the Blues, he was super important in their social media run through the playoffs last year. But he put out something for he basically has created Barstool Outdoors, and he did I don't remember how many episodes, but it's essentially the equivalent of the old hunting shows that you would see on television, except it's 10 times more interesting. The music is relevant to people from 2005 on, and it was really interesting to see they were doing this type of content. And so I realized, all right, that, while that seemed interesting to me prior to that, I didn't really know what my angle would be. And for some reason, there was a click there where I just kind of said, okay, I know what I can do with this. So I did a behind-the-scenes tour with a brewery, a local brewery in my hometown. It's a small little microbrewery, I guess is what they're called. But I did a little thing there. I did something behind the scenes with the Humane Society locally to me, and some little stuff like that. I'm also through school now. I'm on a television show out of Southern Illinois. I really, for the life of me, don't actually know anything about this television show, so I wish I could tell you more, but I really can't. I write for the local newspaper around here, not that far away from where I live. So, we just, the reality is if you don't just absorb, dive headfirst into this stuff, you're not going to learn it. And that's really the inspiration for any of this is I just want to learn how to do this stuff. And the more I learn how to do it, actually, the more I understand how to manage it and how to help put the right people in the right situations, because I understand what goes into making a podcast or making, digital media, whether it be a short video, graphics to go up on Twitter, stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it. And so I just love being able to understand it. And I don't think that we're even close to where we want to be with the video stuff. Like I said, most of what's come out right now has just been me kind of testing the waters so that I can understand what's the best move for us going forward.
Yeah, that's so interesting to me because I feel like this happens with any content creator where you just want that gratification right away and you'll give up on it. And I think it's our generation too. It's just, we'll give up on things so quickly because we have so many options and you just say, oh, I'll go do something else. Like, this isn't working. Let me try this now. And I think that's the key is, pick a few things, really focus on them. And I think you're doing just that. You got video, you got podcasts, that's your wheelhouse. You have some other things on the side that you can focus on, like for Big Red World, but those are the ones you really want to make quality. But what's your advice to people who are trying to start these media startups, I guess you could say, and how do they balance, I guess, everything you're going through right now, like learning on the fly, diversifying the content, but at the same time making sure they're putting out quality content and they're not just putting out a bunch of average or bad content because they're getting too involved?
Well, I think the easiest piece of advice, first of all, would be don't be afraid to look stupid. Or don't be afraid to sound stupid, I suppose would be the correct terminology. Because you're going to sound stupid. And when I say stupid, it's just you're going to sound awkward, you're going to sound clumsy, you're going to sound uncomfortable the first time you do this type of stuff. Now, if you have a background in talking on, radio or anything, public announcing, like one of the things that helped me with this is I did student section stuff when I was in high school. So like I'd been on a microphone once or twice in my life before I knew kind of that. So it helped me get into it a little bit. But the most important thing outside of just being comfortable and not being afraid to look stupid is really going to be just don't expect that it's going to just blow up all of a sudden. Don't expect that it's going to be something where if you put, $70 into this microphone and $60 or $500 in this mixing board and $60 in these headphones, if you go out and spend all this money, all of a sudden it's going to be great. Because you can have the best recording equipment in the world. And this is I'm probably just saying something that's been said a million times before, but you could have the best recording equipment in the world. You could have the best studio, the best setup. You could be recording in Joe Rogan's personal studio. And if you don't know how to run a show, how to make it entertaining, how to do different things with it, then it's never going to catch on. And then on top of that, the self-promotion is huge. You've got to be comfortable with looking stupid. You've got to be willing to just put your head down and go. Even if the audio quality sounds bad, it's about what are you saying? What's actually coming out of this? And you can make that audio quality get better over time. I mean, just in the last year, I've gone leaps and bounds ahead of where I was. And it only took a $60 microphone when I started off. So again, it's not about the money. It's about figuring out the format, figuring out how to talk, figuring out what you want to talk about, what you talk best about, and being researched and educated on all those topics. And then just saying it. And if you sound stupid, if you sound weird, so what? We all sound stupid 15 times a day. I sound stupid more than most, so like it is what it is.
I think I agree with you on that, and I think that's a good sentiment and a good goal to have. Is people are afraid, okay, I'm gonna make a fool of myself, or nobody's gonna like this. And I think you got to go into it saying, okay, it doesn't matter how I do it; it just matters if I enjoy it. And you have to have entertaining content. You got to be willing to fall flat on your face before you pick up some things here along the way. And when we first started this podcast, Aaron, I was like, I don't know if really anybody's going to enjoy this, or even if I'm going to enjoy it.
Yeah, it's all trial and error. And I think too, you gotta just do it so you learn. And then once you learn, oh, people like this, or they want to hear that, then you pick that out and you kind of make a pile of, you build up what people want to hear. And I think that's how you start, at least from what I've found and what I've seen other people succeed.
Well, it's about the repetition of it too, because the more times people see that name of whatever your show is, it just makes them more willing to click the next time. Sure, maybe the first time they saw it, they didn't click, but maybe the 15th or the 16th time, they'll finally click, Yeah.
And I think
that type of stuff.
The more podcasts or the more content that you push out, whether it be social media posts or podcasts or videos or whatever it is, that's ultimately going to help you get in front of your audience, not just from repetition, but also Google is gonna recognize that. I mean, when I search for Weekendology, we're plugging our own show, but like we're the first things that pop up. When we search Weekendology podcasts, our podcast is the first thing that shows up too. And so when you have Big Red World or Weekendology or Joe Rogan or whatever it is, people are going to be like, oh, this is something I've not seen before. I'm going to check it out. And then hopefully you gain a subscriber or a follower, an audience that way as well.
Well, that's the cool thing. If someone goes and looks up Big Red World right now on iTunes because they heard us talking about it on the show, they will see every Big Red World podcast come up first. So it's every Big Red World podcast and then everything, miscellaneous after that.
Yeah.
So if someone is listening to Weekendology, they're a fan of Weekendology, they decide to go to the Big Red Network and check out some of the other shows, there's this cross promotion we're talking about right there.
I'm on Google right now, and I'm searching Big Red World, and it's the first thing that comes up. It's the website, it's the podcast, it's pretty much everything that's related to you guys for blogs and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's just the power of how the internet works and the repetition and the drive to get more content out.
Thanks, Al Gore.
Yes, thanks, Al Gore. We appreciate that.
So that brings me to my last question. What do you envision? I guess, what is Big Red World today? And then what's the future hold for it? Like what does it stand for right now? And what can we expect moving forward? Once people start following Big Red World and all of the other podcasts are part of the family.
Oh, it's a great question. Right now it's me, and I don't say that negatively, but right now it's me trying to, we went through year one, and year one was fantastic. We topped 26,000 downloads in a year. In literally the first year as a network, 26,000 downloads, I think, is just outlandishly good. Better than I would have obviously ever have imagined. So that was huge. So now we're stepping back for a second. We're looking at what was good, what wasn't good. And, me and Alec, with being still in school, the problem is we don't go to school in the same place. And when we get together, a lot of good things happen. And so the problem is trying to find times where we can sit down and we can we can go over everything that we have, all the information, all the people that we're talking to, and we can get on the same page. But we're starting to get there, and there's a couple new shows that are in the wings that are coming soon. I can't drop any information. Well, you know what? I can say one thing. I'll plug Daiquiris and Ovaries. That's a new show. Female-only cast coming soon. Can't give too much more information about that, but based on the titled Deckers and Ovaries. It would be something interesting, certainly. So it's right now, it's now just about continuing to, one, push out content, find new people, and just fill it out. We've created the base, right? You know what it kind of is. You know what it generally is. It's got a little bit of name recognition. I mean, locally in the area where I'm at, there's a decent little amount of name recognition. I'm not going to act like I'm a local celebrity, but people that know me or that, have associated with me previously, they even know it, where I go up to someone that I've not seen in forever or never really talked to, and I go, "Oh, hey, you're doing a podcast now, aren't you?"
You're an SIUE celebrity.
Yeah, you're a local celebrity now. So
actually, I think SIUE is the place I'm known the least because I show up there the least. So that's mom and dad. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that out loud. The future again, it's just trying to find a way to help other people grow. Like at the end of the day, if I make enough money to just get myself by from, point A to point B, and I have a tiny little house and that's it, like I really wouldn't care because I just love doing this. And whenever I get to watch someone that had a really great idea come, like they'll text me with an, and I've seen it before because it's been me, right? When you have that great idea, when you say, I'm going to do a podcast, you get so excited and you just want to chase it. And you want to, that's all you can think about. And when I see someone that comes to me with this really awesome idea, and that's all they're talking about, and they're so excited, and they've got 1.5 million ideas, and to be able to get that from, this idea that they came to me with to this legitimate podcast to something that has a little bit of a following. I mean, I'll go back to the high school podcast we started last year. We knew that they had a little bit of a following. We knew that they had a little bit of an audience, but it came out and it exploded. And now it's something that locally around the area, it's pretty decently known about. I mean, people have a little bit of an idea on who this show is, and they've kind of created, or I would say they're a little bit of a local celebrity. So that the future is just continuing to put as many people on the network as we can and expose as many people as we can.
Nice. Well, we're happy to have you on, Collin. Thanks so much for joining an episode of the Weekendology Podcast. We wish Big Red World all the luck in the future. We're excited to be a part of the network, to continue to help it grow. I only expect great things from everyone here as well. You're welcome back on the show at any time.
Well, he's on the team, so I would hope
exactly.
So. You're not allowed.
I was legally obligated to say
We're
that.
We're going rogue.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you don't want to talk to me ever again. It'll probably only go poorly after this. The first time is usually good. Second time is yes. Third time is when we stop talking altogether.
Exactly. Yeah, that's how it works. But if you liked what we talked about in this episode, you want to continue the conversation up afterwards, hit us up on Twitter, YouTube, every social media that we have. We want to hear from you. Check out Collin's podcast, The Big Red World. You can find them on Twitter at Big Red Social. Their website is bigredworld.org. We're on Twitter at Weekendology Pods. We're on Spreaker, iTunes, Spotify, the whole 9 yards. And if you have any topics that you want us to discuss or talk about in the next couple weeks, drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you as well. But we've got new episodes every Friday. So till then, we'll see you guys next week.